My name is Claire Evans, and I'm 32, a teacher in Boulder, Colorado. My flaw: I'm too trusting. I always believed family would protect what was sacred until the cabin taught me otherwise. The mountain cabin lay silent, a relic of my childhood summers, until one relative betrayed us all. They stole what wasn't theirs to take. If you're watching, please like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Have you ever had a family fight over property, money, or inheritance? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and how you'd handle it. The cabin sat tucked high in the Rockies, surrounded by pines that whispered when the wind rolled down the slope. To most people, it was just an old structure with creaking floors and shutters that rattled during storms. But to me, it was everything. It was where I'd roasted marshmallows with Dad until the stars blurred into morning, where Mom taught me how to braid flowers into crowns. Where every summer, cousins gathered, and laughter spilled louder than the rushing river below. The cabin was family. The cabin was a memory. So when I discovered one relative had quietly taken it, sold it like it was theirs alone, I felt something inside me crack. I didn't know then that the betrayal would grow deeper, uglier, or that I'd one day claim it back as mine. But I do know this: that cabin became the battleground that changed everything. The cabin wasn't just a building. It was a heartbeat. Every June, when school let out, my parents would pack up the Subaru, and we'd drive 2 hours into the Rockies. I remember pressing my forehead to the window as the mountains rose higher, their peaks still dusted with snow even in summer. By the time we turned down that narrow gravel road, I could already smell the pine needles. Dad would roll down the windows, grin, and say, "Breathe it in, Claire. This is freedom." Our cabin was built by my grandfather in the 1960s. 2 bedrooms, 1 loft, and a fireplace that smoked too much if you didn't stack the logs just right. The furniture was mismatched. The roof leaked when storms rolled through. And bats sometimes claimed the rafters. But to us, it was magic. Summers meant card games by lantern light, pancakes on the old iron skillet, and hikes that left our legs aching but our hearts full. We weren't rich. My mom was a nurse, my dad a mechanic. But at the cabin, none of that mattered. It was ours. But of course, it wasn't just ours. Grandpa had left the cabin to the family, which meant my dad and his siblings. Every summer, my Uncle Paul and his wife Linda brought their kids. My Aunt Susan would come too, quieter but warm. It worked at first. Each family got their turn, shared the chores, and split the costs of upkeep. But as we got older, tensions started to creep in. Paul complained about carrying the load when he paid for roof repairs one year. Linda made snide remarks about how some families use the place more than others, and yet, every summer we came back. Because the cabin still felt safe. Looking back, the warning signs were there. Like the time Paul suggested, over a campfire, maybe one of us should just buy the place outright. Too messy, sharing it forever, Dad bristled. That's not what Grandpa wanted. He built it for all of us, Paul smirked. Yeah, well, sentiment doesn't pay for new plumbing. I was only 16 then, roasting a marshmallow, but even I felt the shift. As an adult, the cabin became my sanctuary. Teaching in Boulder was demanding, and every summer I drove up alone or with a few close friends. The silence, the stars, the creak of the porch swing, it healed me. I thought everyone still felt the same way. That even with small arguments, the cabin's meaning was bigger than greed. But I was wrong. One August evening, I came up for a solo weekend. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky orange. As I unlocked the door, I noticed something odd, a stack of new real estate flyers on the counter. My chest tightened as I flipped through them. Properties in the area, prices circled in red, and scribbled on the back of one, Uncle Paul's handwriting. Cabin could go for $. Check deeds. My stomach dropped. The silence of the cabin didn't feel safe anymore. It felt like a secret. The following summer, the tension that had once been whispers turned into open cracks. I arrived at the cabin with a bag of groceries and a pile of lesson plans I intended to ignore. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something had shifted. The curtains were new, The couch cushions had been replaced, and on the wall where Grandpa's photo once hung, there was now a decorative mirror, gaudy in gold. I froze. That photo of Grandpa in his flannel jacket, hammer in hand, had been there my whole life. I whispered to myself, "Who would take it down?" The answer came quickly. That evening, Paul and Linda showed up with their son. Paul carried a box of wine like he was arriving at a party he owned. "Place looks better, doesn't it?" he said, motioning to the mirror. I clenched my jaw. "Where's Grandpa's picture?" Linda smirked, sipping her glass before answering. "We put it in storage. Time to modernize, Claire. No one wants to spend their summer in a shrine." I felt my cheeks burn. "It's not a shrine. It's our family history," Paul chuckled, low and dismissive. "History doesn't pay property taxes." The next morning, I caught Paul outside, pacing with his phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, the place could fetch a good price," he muttered. "Lot value alone is worth more than memories." "Don't worry, I've got the papers handled." I stepped onto the porch. "What papers?" He startled, then plastered on a smile. "Nothing you need to worry about, kiddo." "I'm not a kid," I snapped. "If you're talking about the cabin, I have a right to know." His smile hardened. "Rights cost money, Claire. And unless you're planning on footing the bills, maybe sit this one out." My stomach twisted. He wasn't just talking big. He was planning something. Later that day, Linda cornered me in the kitchen as I washed dishes. Her voice dripped with sweetness, but her words cut. "You're a teacher, right? Sweet job, noble and all. But it doesn't exactly put you in a position to maintain a property like this." I dropped the plate into the sink, water splashing. "What's that supposed to mean?" She tilted her head, smile never fading. "It means maybe leave the real estate to the ones who can afford it." I bit back tears, whispering, "This cabin isn't about money." She leaned closer, eyes glittering. "Everything's about money, Claire." That evening, I went for a walk down the gravel road, needing air. When I returned, Paul's truck was gone, but so was the metal deed box that always sat on the bookshelf. I searched the cabin, heart pounding, but it was nowhere. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't paranoia. This wasn't family bickering. Something was being taken from me. From all of us. The betrayal didn't arrive like a whisper. It landed like a thunderclap. 2 weeks after that uneasy weekend, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Miss Evans?" a voice said. "This is Randy from Mountain Realty. Just confirming, we'll need access to the cabin for a showing this Saturday." I nearly dropped the phone. "A showing?" "Yes, ma'am. The property is listed. Your Uncle Paul signed off as representative of the family estate. We already have 3 interested buyers." My throat went dry. "That's impossible. He can't sell it without everyone's consent." The man hesitated. "Well, according to the deed, he can." I hung up and drove straight to Mom's house, heart racing. She looked up from her knitting when I burst in. "Did you know?" I demanded, voice trembling. "Paul listed the cabin for sale." Her face went pale. "Claire?" She started, but didn't finish. "You knew," I whispered, betrayal like acid on my tongue. Mom set her knitting aside, hands shaking. "Paul said it was for the best. That you," she faltered, "that you wouldn't be able to keep up with the costs anyway." I staggered back like she'd slapped me. "So you're siding with him? After everything that the cabin meant to Dad? To all of us?" Her silence was answer enough. I drove up to the cabin that weekend, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. And sure enough, there it was. A bright red for sale sign staked into the dirt, tilting slightly in the wind. Paul was on the porch, shaking hands with a couple in hiking boots. Linda hovered nearby, laughing, holding brochures. My chest burned as I stormed up the steps. "What the hell are you doing?" Paul barely glanced at me. "Business, Claire. Something you wouldn't understand." "You don't have the right," I shouted. "This cabin belongs to all of us." He smirked, slipping a brochure into the couple's hands. "Not anymore." I filed the paperwork. "Turns out when you don't contribute a dime to maintenance, you don't get a say." I trembled, fury and shock mixing in my veins. "You stole it." Paul leaned in, his voice low and venomous. I claimed it, because unlike you, I know how to turn dead weight into profit. I left that day shattered. The mountain roads blurred as tears stung my eyes. By the time I reached Boulder, I felt hollow, like the cabin itself had been ripped out of my chest. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't focus at work. I kept seeing that for sale sign, Linda's smirk, Paul's cold eyes, and the worst part, Mom's silence. The people who should have fought for me, for the memory of Grandpa, for our family, had turned their backs. I was alone. But in the wreckage of that betrayal, something inside me whispered, "You won't stay broken. Not forever." Because if Paul thought he could erase me with a forged signature and a real estate sign, he was about to learn just how dangerous a too trusting daughter could become when she's pushed to the edge. Betrayal has a sound. For me, it was the hammering echo of that "for sale" sign flapping in the mountain wind. That image haunted me, even as I lay in bed nights later, staring at the ceiling of my Boulder apartment. I stopped answering calls. My friends thought I was just tired from teaching, but the truth was uglier. I couldn't face anyone. My life outside that cabin felt colorless now. Every corner of my apartment reminded me of what I'd lost. The plant on my windowsill? It had been clipped from a wildflower at the cabin. The blanket draped over my couch? Knitted by Grandma one summer while we all sat on the porch. Now those memories felt stolen, auctioned off with a fake smile and a legal trick. One evening, I drove to Mom's, still hoping she'd wake up and fight for me. She opened the door, her face tired. "Claire, you shouldn't be here." "Why not?" I demanded. "Because Paul might find out you grew a spine?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "He's family too. He's doing what has to be done." My throat tightened. "What about me? I am family. Doesn't my voice matter?" Her eyes flicked away, guilt shadowing them. "You don't understand the costs. The taxes, the upkeep." I whispered, voice breaking. "You're letting him erase me. You're helping him." She didn't deny it. That night, I broke. I sat on my balcony in the dark, knees pulled to my chest, sobbing until my ribs hurt. I whispered into the silence, "Grandpa." "Dad, I'm sorry." I let them take it. For the first time, I believed the lie Paul wanted me to believe, that I was powerless. Just a teacher with no money, no influence, no way to stop him. I felt erased. But then, a thought flickered. If Paul truly owned the cabin fair and square, why had he hidden it? Why sneak lie and bury deeds? Why intimidate me instead of showing me clean paperwork? Because he was hiding something, and if there was a paper trail, I could find it. I wiped my tears, stood up, and looked out at the mountains glowing faintly in the distance. Paul thought he'd won, that I'd disappear quietly, like Mom, swallowing shame and silence. But he underestimated me. Too trusting? Maybe once. But now I had nothing left to lose. And a woman with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous of all. Grief made me weak. But anger made me sharp. I'd spent my life believing family ties were unbreakable. Paul taught me they were only as strong as the deeds and signatures holding them together. If he thought I wouldn't fight, he was about to learn otherwise. The first place I went wasn't a lawyer. It was the county clerk's office. The smell of old paper hit me as I dug through property records. My heart pounded as I scrolled the digital archives until, there it was, ownership had shifted. But not in the way Paul claimed. The deed wasn't signed by all siblings. Only Paul's name appeared, along with a signature line that looked forged, sloppy even. A half-hearted attempt at my father's handwriting. I printed copies, my fingers shaking with adrenaline. I called Ethan, my cousin, the only relative who hadn't been sipping Paul's Kool-Aid for years. He met me at a diner in town, sliding into the booth with wide eyes. "You sounded urgent," he said. I spread the papers across the table. Paul forged Dad's signature to transfer ownership. "Look at this." Ethan leaned forward, studying it. His jaw tightened. "That's not Uncle Tom's handwriting. I've seen his signature 100 times. Paul's screwed," I whispered. "We can nail him for fraud." He grinned. "Finally. Count me in." Ethan started keeping tabs on Paul, dropping by under the guise of helping with renovations, listening to his rants and noting every shady thing he said. One night, Ethan texted me. He bragged about how you're too soft to fight, said you'll crawl back to teaching and forget all about it. I stared at the screen, my fists clenching. Too soft, too trusting. That's what he believed. Good. Let him. Because the quieter I looked, the harder I'd strike. I took the forged deed to a lawyer friend of mine, Carla. She studied it, frowning. This is bad, she said. Forgery, fraud, illegal transfer of property. If you can prove intent, Paul's in serious trouble, I leaned in. How do I prove it? Carla smiled thinly. By letting him hang himself. People like Paul can't stop bragging. All you need is evidence. That summer, Paul scheduled a family meeting at the cabin, pretending it was about upkeep. Ethan and I knew better. We planted a recorder in the living room, tucked between the books Grandpa once kept by the fireplace, and sure enough, Paul spilled. As I sat quietly in the corner, he smirked and said to Linda, loud enough for everyone to hear, "They'll never prove a thing. Tom's gone, and I've got the papers in my name. By the time Claire figures it out, the cabin will be sold." My chest tightened. I kept my face neutral, but inside I knew. This was it. The rope he'd tied around his neck was ready to snap. I had the deed. I had the forgery. Now I had his confession. The trap was set. But could I bring myself to destroy my uncle and save the cabin? The next morning, I woke up with that recording still buzzing in my head. Paul's arrogance, his certainty that I was powerless, it had to be exposed. But not all at once, not yet. If I swung too early, he'd wriggle free like he always had. This first move had to sting just enough to shake him. I went back to the county office, recording and forged deed in hand. The clerk, a woman named Maria who'd known my family for years, frowned as she compared signatures. "This doesn't look right," she muttered. "Your dad's signature always had that long loop on the T. This one doesn't." I leaned forward. "If I file an official challenge, does that freeze the sale?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, until a judge rules the property can't be transferred." My heart skipped. A freeze. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a block. A shield. I filed the paperwork on the spot. 2 days later, Paul called me, his voice sharp as a knife. "What the hell did you do?" I stayed calm. "I protected what was ours." He barked a bitter laugh. "You think freezing the sale scares me? That cabin's as good as gone. You're wasting your time." But his tone gave him away. He was rattled. That weekend, Linda showed up at my apartment unannounced, all crocodile tears and faux concern. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said, wringing her hands. "Paul's under so much stress. Selling the cabin will help everyone. Why can't you just let it go?" I crossed my arms. "Because Grandpa didn't build that cabin for one man's greed. He built it for all of us." Her mask slipped for just a second. "Greed? You think teaching pays enough to keep that place running?" I didn't flinch. "It'll stay in the family, just not in yours." Her face hardened. She spun on her heel and left, but I knew she'd carry that back to Paul, and he'd feel the crack widening beneath his feet. The following week, I drove up to the cabin. The for sale sign was still there, but now it had a bright yellow sticker across it. Sale pending court review. I stood on the gravel road, staring at it, my chest swelling with something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. I whispered, voice trembling, "You're not taking this from me. It wasn't over." The battle had just begun. But for the first time, Paul couldn't just bulldoze over me with paperwork and smug grins. I'd drawn blood, and soon I'd gut his entire scheme. Paul was shaken, Linda was furious, and the sale was frozen. But I knew my uncle. He wouldn't go down quietly. His next move would be bigger, dirtier. And I had to be ready. Paul always underestimated me. To him, I was the soft one, a schoolteacher with no money, no influence, no fight. He didn't see what was coming. And by the time I struck, it was already too late. The probate hearing was scheduled. In the county courthouse, a modest building with creaky wooden benches and sunlight streaming through tall windows, sorry, strutted in wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, a smirk plastered on his face. Linda clung to his arm, whispering in his ear like she was the queen beside her king. I sat across the aisle with Ethan, heart pounding, recording device tucked neatly into a manila folder. Carla, my lawyer friend, adjusted her glasses and gave me a small nod. The judge entered. Calling the case, Evans versus Evans. Paul launched first, his voice dripping with false righteousness. Your Honor, my niece is confused. I legally assumed responsibility for the cabin because I alone have carried the financial burden. It was within my rights. The judge raised an eyebrow. And do you have documentation proving all heirs consented? Paul's smile faltered. Well, of course. The deed. That's when Carla stood, holding up the forged paperwork. With respect, Your Honor, this so-called deed is a forgery. Compare the signature here with Thomas Evans's verified signatures on prior documents. The discrepancy is glaring. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Paul sputtered. That's ridiculous. Carla pressed play on the recorder. Paul's voice filled the room, arrogant and clear. They'll never prove a thing. Tom's gone and I've got the papers in my name. By the time Claire figures it out, the cabin will be sold. The gallery erupted. Even the judge leaned back, eyes narrowing. Linda's face drained of color. Paul's jaw dropped, rage twisting his features. That recording is taken out of context, he barked. The judge slammed the gavel. Enough. Mr. Evans, what I hear is a confession of fraud and intent to deceive. This court does not take such matters lightly. Paul's swagger evaporated. He slumped in his chair, eyes darting like a trapped animal. By the end of the session, the judge voided the fraudulent deed, froze Paul's ability to act on behalf of the estate, and scheduled a criminal review for document tampering. The cabin? Returned to joint ownership of the family, with one stipulation: an independent trustee would oversee its future to ensure fairness. I exhaled, trembling, relief flooding my chest. Outside the courthouse, neighbors and cousins who'd heard the rumors gathered. Whispers swirled. Paul forged documents? Did you hear the recording? Claire stood up to him. Good for her. For years, Paul had been the loudest voice in the family. Now everyone saw him for what he was, and me? For the first time, they saw me as more than the quiet teacher. They saw me as the one who fought back. Paul wasn't just beaten, he was humiliated. But humiliation breeds bitterness. And as much as justice had been served, the aftermath was only beginning. The courthouse victory didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like silence, heavy, trembling silence that sank into my bones. Paul walked out with his head lowered, Linda clutching his arm like she could hold together what was already falling apart. Neighbors avoided their eyes, whispers trailing behind them like smoke. For the first time in my life, my uncle didn't look untouchable. He looked small. The days that followed split the family clean down the middle. Aunt Susan called me the night after the hearing, her voice soft but steady. You did the right thing, Claire. Your dad would have been proud. Her words made my throat ache. I didn't want Grandpa's legacy to be sold off like a yard sale. You protected it, she said firmly. That matters. But Mom was another story. She didn't call. Didn't text. When I finally showed up at her house, she wouldn't meet my eyes. You embarrassed this family, she whispered, knitting needles clicking in her lap. Dragging your uncle into court. He's still your blood. I stood in the doorway, my chest tightening. And what about me, Mom? Aren't I blood too? Her silence told me everything. News spread fast in our town. Paul's construction business took a hit. Clients pulled contracts, banks backed away. His reputation as the successful brother crumbled overnight. One morning, Ethan sent me a screenshot. Paul's truck, parked outside the bar before noon. Captioned by someone else with a cruel comment, "From big shot to washed up." I should have felt pity. But I didn't. Because pity is for people who stumble. Not for people who scheme, the trustee called me a week later. We'll be arranging family discussions about the cabin's upkeep. It will remain in the family as your grandfather intended. I went up that weekend alone. The drive felt different. Lighter somehow. When I unlocked the door, the smell of pine and dust hit me like a memory. The fireplace still smoked, the floor still creaked, the porch still swayed. I sat in Grandpa's old chair and whispered, "We did it. It's safe." For the first time since the betrayal, I felt peace. Revenge hadn't brought me joy. It had brought me clarity. I'd lost something in this fight: my mother's support, my belief that family always meant loyalty. But I'd gained something bigger. Strength, the kind that doesn't come from trust or naivety, but from standing up when someone tries to erase you. The cabin was safe, Paul was ruined, but my story wasn't finished. Because protecting a legacy is one thing. Claiming my own place in it, that was the final step. The cabin sits quiet again now, tucked in the Rockies just as Grandpa built it. But it doesn't feel haunted by betrayal anymore. It feels reclaimed. The trustees' plan was simple. Each family got designated time with shared costs written in black and white. No more whispers, no more power plays. I volunteered to take the first rotation that summer. When I unlocked the door, I carried groceries in both arms and a heart that no longer trembled. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The creaky floor greeted me like an old friend. For the first time in months, I breathed easy. Paul hasn't spoken to me since the hearing. His business continues to crumble. Linda avoids me in public, her once perfect smile now brittle. And Mom? She still hasn't forgiven me. But forgiveness isn't something I owe her anymore. Because this fight wasn't just about a cabin. It was about refusing to be erased. About standing up when someone decides your voice doesn't matter. About proving that silence isn't loyalty, it's surrender. I thought being too trusting was my flaw. But I see now it was also my strength. Trusting in my worth gave me the courage to fight. And I did fight. I won. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Family isn't defined by who shares your blood. It's defined by who honors your place, your history, your worth. And when someone tries to strip that away, fight back. Because no matter how quiet they expect you to be, your voice has power. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Tell me, if a relative tried to steal your family's legacy, would you fight to reclaim it or walk away forever? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments and where you're watching from.